The rain was coming down in sheets when Jerome Washington heard the knock on his garage door at 11:30 p.m. What he found outside would test everything his late father taught him about helping strangers, and the decision he made in those next 60 seconds would transform not just his life, but an entire community. What happened next will restore your faith in the power of one good deed. But first, you need to understand what brought Jerome to this crossroads on that stormy October night in Detroit. Jerome had been running Washington Auto Repair for 15 years, ever since his father Samuel passed away from a heart attack right there in Bay 3. The garage sat in the Corktown neighborhood, where gentrification was slowly pushing out families who'd called this place home for generations. Every month the bills got harder to pay, and every month Jerome watched another old friend pack up and leave. At 52, Jerome's hands bore the calluses and scars of 3 decades under the hood. His back ached from years of crawling under cars, and his marriage to Linda had ended 2 years ago when the stress of barely making ends meet finally wore them both down. Their daughter Maya was in her 2nd year at Wayne State, studying engineering, the first Washington to attend college, and Jerome was determined to keep her there, even if it meant eating ramen noodles for dinner most nights. The knock came again, more urgent this time. Jerome wiped his hands on his coveralls and walked to the bay door, his steel-toed boots echoing in the empty garage. Through the rain-streaked window, he could make out a figure hunched under a small umbrella, standing next to what looked like an expensive car with its hood up. He had no idea he was being watched. Jerome opened the door to find an elderly Asian man in his 70s, completely soaked despite the umbrella. His silver hair was plastered to his head, and his designer suit, which probably cost more than Jerome made in a month, was ruined. Behind him sat a sleek black Bentley, steam rising from its engine compartment. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," the man said, his voice carrying a slight accent Jerome couldn't quite place. "My car broke down, and I saw your light on. I know it's past business hours, but—" "Come on inside out of that rain," Jerome said, stepping back. He'd seen enough desperate people in his life to recognize genuine distress, regardless of how expensive their clothes were. "Let's take a look at what's wrong." The man introduced himself as Henry Chen, and as they walked toward the Bentley, Jerome noticed Henry favoring his left leg. The old man was clearly in pain, though he tried to hide it. "What happened exactly?" Jerome asked, pulling his heavy-duty flashlight from his pocket. "I was driving back from the hospital. My wife, she's been there for 3 weeks now. The car just started overheating about 2 miles back. I pulled over, but I don't know anything about engines." Jerome heard something in the man's voice, the same hollow exhaustion he'd carried during his father's final days. But then everything changed when Jerome lifted the Bentley's hood. The problem was immediately obvious. A burst radiator hose had sprayed coolant all over the engine compartment. It was a relatively simple fix, but finding the right hose for a luxury car at midnight would be impossible. Most shops would tell Henry to call a tow truck and wait until morning. "Well, Mr. Chen, I've got good news and bad news," Jerome said, straightening up. "Good news is it's just a hose. Bad news is I don't have the exact part for a Bentley, and everywhere's closed until morning." Henry's shoulders sagged. "How much would a tow truck cost?" "Oh, probably 200, maybe more in this weather. Plus, you'd need a hotel room, and honestly, finding one tonight might be tough with the Lions game tomorrow bringing folks into town." That's when Jerome made the decision that would change everything. But here's what nobody expected. Jerome didn't make it for the reason you might think. "Tell you what," Jerome said, walking back to his parts room. "I've got a universal hose that should work. It won't be pretty, but it'll get you where you need to go. Let me see what I can do." For the next hour, Jerome worked in the rain, jerry-rigging a solution with the wrong hose, extra clamps, and pure determination. His clothes were soaked through, and his arthritic hands cramped in the cold. But something about Henry's quiet dignity reminded him of his own father. Samuel Washington had always said that a man's character showed most clearly when nobody was keeping score. Henry tried to help despite his obvious pain, holding the flashlight and handing Jerome tools. They didn't talk much, but Jerome learned that Henry had been married for 47 years, that his wife Eleanor was fighting lung cancer, and that they had no children. Henry had been at the hospital every day for 3 weeks, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair because he couldn't bear to leave her alone. Henry reached for his wallet. "What do I owe you?" Jerome was about to quote his usual after-hours rate. Double the normal charge seemed fair for emergency work at midnight. The $150 would help with Maya's tuition payment that was coming due. But looking at this elderly man, soaked and exhausted from weeks of hospital vigils, Jerome heard his father's voice. "Sometimes the right thing costs something, son. That's how you know it's right." "Don't worry about it," Jerome said. "Just get yourself home safe and dry." Henry stared at him. "I can't let you work for nothing. You've been here past midnight, in the rain. Mr. Chen, I've been where you are. When someone's hurting, we help. That's all there is to it. The reason why will shock you." Henry's eyes filled with tears. He gripped Jerome's hand with surprising strength. "Thank you. I'll never forget this kindness." As the Bentley's taillights disappeared into the storm, Jerome locked up his garage and drove home to his small apartment above the laundromat. He fell asleep, thinking about Maya's tuition and wondering if he'd just made a $150 mistake he couldn't afford. 3 days later, Jerome was replacing brakes on Mrs. Patterson's ancient Civic when a black SUV pulled up outside. 2 men in expensive suits got out, followed by Henry Chen, who walked directly to Jerome's bay. "Jerome," Henry said, his voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there during the storm, "we need to talk." That's when the real story begins. Henry gestured to a nearby office chair. "Please sit down. I owe you an explanation." Jerome wiped his hands, confused by the formal tone and the entourage. "Look, Mr. Chen, if the hose failed, the hose is fine. Perfect, actually." Henry smiled. "Jerome, I wasn't entirely honest with you the other night. My name is Henry Chen, but I'm also the CEO of Chen Industries. Perhaps you've heard of us." Jerome's wrench clattered to the floor. Chen Industries owned half the manufacturing plants in Michigan. Their logo was on everything from auto parts to appliances. Henry Chen wasn't just wealthy, he was one of the richest men in America. "I don't understand," Jerome said slowly. "I was coming back from visiting Eleanor, just as I told you, but I could have called any of a dozen people to help me. I have drivers, mechanics on call, people who would have handled everything with a phone call." Henry paused, his eyes growing distant. "But something made me knock on your door instead." One of the suited men opened a briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with documents. "For 3 weeks, I sat in that hospital watching nurses and doctors work 16-hour shifts to save my wife. I saw janitors staying late to comfort patients who had no visitors. I watched people with nothing give everything to help strangers." Henry's voice grew stronger. "Then I meet you, and in 5 minutes you reminded me of something I'd forgotten in 40 years of building an empire." Jerome's mouth went dry. "What's that?" "That the real measure of success isn't what you accumulate. It's what you give when it costs you something." But here's what nobody expected. Henry opened the folder and spread blueprints across Jerome's workbench. "This is the old Packard plant site, 6 blocks from here. Empty for 20 years. I bought it yesterday." The blueprints showed plans for a state-of-the-art automotive training and manufacturing plant. The detail was incredible. Workshops, classrooms, offices, even a small production line. "I want you to run it," Henry said simply. Jerome's legs gave out. He sat down hard in the office chair, staring at plans that looked like something from a dream. I can't, this is millions of dollars." 14 million, actually. But here's the beautiful part. It's not charity. It's an investment. Henry pointed to various sections of the blueprints. "This facility will train automotive technicians for the new electric vehicle industry. We'll partner with Wayne State and other colleges. Students will earn certifications while working on real projects. And you, Jerome Washington, will be the director." The room spun. Jerome tried to process what Henry was telling him. "Why me? I'm just a guy with a garage."
"No," Henry said firmly. "You're a man who worked in the rain for an hour to help a stranger, then refused payment when that stranger was obviously wealthy enough to afford it. You're exactly the kind of person who should be training the next generation."
This is what happens when one person decides to care, Henry continued. The facility will employ 50 people initially, growing to over 200 within 5 years. We'll prioritize hiring from this neighborhood, training local residents for careers that pay $40,000 to $60,000 annually. Your daughter Maya, she'll have a full internship program and guaranteed employment after graduation, if she wants it. Jerome's eyes filled with tears. My garage, this place, it's all I have left of my father. Keep it, Henry said. Run both. This facility will be the Washington Institute for Automotive Excellence. Your father's name will be on the building. 6 months later, Jerome stood in the gleaming lobby of the Washington Institute, watching as the first class of 30 students toured their new workshops. Maya was among them, having switched her major to automotive engineering with a focus on electric vehicle systems. She wore coveralls with Washington Institute embroidered on the pocket, just like her father and grandfather had worn. Eleanor Chen had made a full recovery and insisted on attending the ribbon-cutting ceremony. She hugged Jerome tightly and whispered, "Henry told me what you did. You saved more than his car that night. You reminded him why we built our company in the first place." The Institute had a waiting list 300 names long. Students came from across the Midwest to train in the latest automotive technology while earning living wages as apprentices. The neighborhood around the facility buzzed with new life as coffee shops, restaurants, and housing developments followed the jobs. Jerome still opened Washington Auto Repair every morning at 7, but now he split his time between the old garage and his office at the Institute. On quiet evenings, he'd stand in Bay 3 where his father had suffered his heart attack, and he swore he could feel Samuel's approval. But here's the part that even Henry Chen couldn't have predicted. The Washington Institute became a model copied across the country. Within 3 years, similar facilities opened in 15 other cities, each one named for a local hero who exemplified the program's values. The Washington model of community-based technical education became federal policy, leading to billions in funding for vocational training nationwide. Jerome was invited to speak at conferences, appeared on national television, and was even asked to advise the White House on manufacturing policy. But every morning, he still put on his coveralls and got his hands dirty, because he never forgot that everything started with one decision to help a stranger in the rain. Maya graduated top of her class and now runs the Institute's Electric Vehicle Research Division. She's developing partnerships with major automakers and has patents pending on 3 innovative battery technologies. Last month, she told her father she was proud to carry on the Washington tradition, but with a twist he never could have imagined. The ripple effects continue to spread. Students who graduated from the Institute have started their own businesses, creating jobs in their home communities. The model has been adapted for other industries, construction, renewable energy, healthcare, always with the same core principle. Train people not just for jobs, but for careers that build strong communities. Henry Chen still drives himself to visit Eleanor at their new home in Grosse Pointe, but twice a month he stops by Jerome's garage. Not because his car needs work, but because he says those conversations keep him grounded. They've become unlikely friends, bonded by a moment when character mattered more than status. Last week, Jerome received a letter from a young woman in Seattle whose brother had graduated from a Washington Institute program and was now earning enough to buy his first home. She wanted to thank the man whose simple act of kindness had somehow changed her entire family's trajectory. Jerome keeps that letter in his desk drawer, right next to a photo of his father and a copy of the original blueprints Henry spread across his workbench that incredible day. Sometimes he'll pull them out and remember that stormy October night when everything changed because he chose to see a stranger's need rather than his own limitations. The question is, what would you have done when that knock came at your door? And more importantly, When opportunity disguised as inconvenience comes knocking in your life, will you be ready to answer?